Дэвид Грей, управляющий партнер PwC. Под ваши аплодисменты.
Good morning. It's great to be here, and it's great to have the privilege of being the first person to make a presentation this morning. So I'm looking forward to that. I've achieved my first ambition for the day, which was to get down the stairs in the dark without falling over. This was my first task that I set myself. What I'm going to do with you is share some research that PwC has done around megatrends. What are the things that are going to shape the 21st century, and particularly the next 20 years in terms of the global economy, and a few insights into how we think that might impact HR matters. What's the people agenda? How's that going to be impacted by these megatrends? A little background on myself and PwC. I am the country managing partner for PwC. As you see in the corner there, we've got our 25 years logo. So we've been in Russia for 25 years. We have, 25 years ago when we started with 3 people. Today we've got about 2,500 people in Russia. The average age of the people in PwC in Russia is 27. So we're actually a very young organization, 25 years old, but we haven't caught up quite with the average age of the people in the organization, 27. We have about 8,000 alumni who have worked for PwC in Russia at one point or another and have joined the business community. So we have alumni all over Russia in all sorts of different jobs, which is very exciting. We also are part of the global PwC network. And what is PwC? PwC is a professional services network. We're famous for doing audits, of course, but we also do tax advice, strategy, HR, consulting, a whole range. We have a big legal firm, a whole range of different services. We started 165 years ago in London. Currently, we have 200,000 people in PwC firms around the world, and we are in about 157 different countries. So when it comes to global insight, we're quite well placed to understand what's shaping the global economy. Every year, we employ 45,000 people, new people. We take 20,000 graduates every year. So getting our HR piece of the strategy of the firm right is absolutely essential. It's right at the heart of what we do. We don't have any assets. We don't have factories. We don't have formulas. We don't have television stations or technology. All we have is our people. Our people is our business. So for us, HR and winning the hearts and minds of our people is the key to the success, not only today, but also for the future. So we're really engaged on this topic. Clients are very important to us. We have about 2,500 clients in Russia, but it's our people is where the business starts. So we won't get clients unless we have the best people, capable of doing the best work, brilliantly organized, work together in teams effectively, able to share information effectively together. So the people agenda is right at the heart, and it's what I worry about as country managing partner for PwC. I worry much more about our people as a principle, because the clients will come if we have the right people. Megatrends. What are the megatrends? The megatrends are 5 global phenomena that are shaping the business environment, society around the world. This is based on research that we've done globally. These 5 trends: shifting global economic power, rapid urbanization, climate change and resource scarcity, technological breakthroughs, and demographic and social change. To give you a little insight into what they are and why they're important, I'm going to go through them one at a time, but first I'm going to share with you a little video that captures the dynamism of these changes. So let's play the video. So I've seen that video a few times. I still get excited when I see that video because to me it kind of captures what an uncertain world we live in and all the change that is taking place. And that gets me excited because I think about my team, about the 200,000 people around the world, about the 2,500 people in Russia, and I see all sorts of opportunities to engage with the issues which these megatrends throw up. So let's talk in a little bit more detail about some of these megatrends. The first megatrend, the shift in global economic power. I think we're all familiar with the fact that over the last 15, 20 years, there has been a big shift in economic power, that China has emerged as a major economic power. Indeed, in 2015, depending on how you measure it, many people say that the Chinese economy is already bigger than the US economy. It's the biggest economy in the world. And we see this tilt, as people call it, towards Asia. And we talk about Russia tilting towards Asia. But Hillary Clinton, I was at an APEC conference, and she talked about the 21st century being America's Pacific century. So it's not just us that thinks that things are shifting east, it's the whole world understands that the drag of economics, the radical improvement in the economic productivity of Asia is changing where the focus of economic activity is. So we all need to think about how that impacts where things are going to get made. Where are our customers? Where are our employees going to be in the future? How do we relate to these changes? How do we make the most of the changes that are coming along with that change in the economy? The next trend, and one that's specifically focused in China, but is a global trend, rapid urbanization. And the statistics here are amazing. And we got there by 2025, there could be nearly 40 cities, each with a population over 10 million. Personally, I believe that cities are actually going to replace countries as the focus for the global economy. It'll be cities competing with other cities that will really distinguish where economic activity takes place, where wealth is created, accumulated, and countries will become less relevant. So it's how effective your cities are going to be that is going to define your economic success in the future. In 1800, only 2% of people lived in cities. By today, in fact, I think it was about 2 years ago, we passed 50%. So 50% of the world's population is living in cities. So increasingly, talking about economics and talking about recruiting and talking about how you work with your workforce, we're talking about an urban workforce living in large urban conurbations. So that has implications for how we think about the world. And it also has implications because of the speed of change. Every week, some 1.5 million people join the urban population. That's 9,000 people an hour. That means in 2 months, the urban population increases by the size of Moscow around the world. So we've got this, it's not just a static thing, if anything, it's accelerating this process of concentration in cities, which is very important for us to think about in how we work together and how we plan our business. Climate change and resource scarcity, the third of our megatrends. This is in some ways an opportunity for Russia. The fact that the world will start running out of certain materials, that as the number of people in the middle class who consume a lot of goods and materials increases in Asia, for example, we're going to need something like 30% more food than we currently produce. That's a phenomenal statistic. Just in the next 15 years, 30% more food. Where's it going to come from? We're going to need an awful lot more oil, gas, metals. So whilst you can see day-to-day short-term fluctuations, the long-term trend is that we need to focus on this as an issue because it's going to be a very important issue. And Russia actually is very well positioned on this issue because we have the great fortune to be an incredibly resource-rich country. Resource-rich is not just oil and gas, it's also people-rich in terms of educated population, agriculturally rich. We have a huge opportunity in the agricultural space if we have the skills to exploit that, if we have the skills and the technology. I wonder sometimes about this one, climate change and resource scarcity, mostly when I'm talking to my 12-year-old stepson about switching the lights off and stuff, whether the Generation Y, how are they on this issue? Because actually it's Generation X, my generation, that is actually surfed a surplus, if you like. In real terms, the cost of everything has come down. Generation Y may live in a very different world where resource scarcity is going to be a much bigger issue and where costs will increase. Of course, my fourth megatrend, technological breakthroughs. 10 years, it took 76 years for a telephone to get into half of all US households. It only took 10 years for a smartphone to get into half of all US households. And in most of those US households, there's probably now about 5 smartphones. Even the kids have smartphones now. And when I grew up, access to the phone was extremely restricted. It was like almost locked because it was such an expensive thing to use the telephone. Now, kids use telephones at very early ages. So the technology is changing rapidly. And this may be the savior for the solution for some of the issues created by some of the other megatrends. How do we fix resource scarcity? Well, maybe we innovate around how we use resources. An example of that is in the last 20 years or so, the amount of fuel consumed in European airspace has basically not changed. It's flat, despite the fact the number of miles flown has gone up something like 35%. And that's because of lighter aeroplanes, better engine technology, innovation around in the aerospace business. So technology is a possible solver for many of the issues that we face in business. It's incredibly disruptive. It can be enormously disruptive. If you think about some of those brands that were famous and dominated their market, Kodak in film, you probably don't even remember film, the film that used to go in the back of cameras, Kodak had something like 80% of the market in certain markets. And then all of a sudden, film's irrelevant. Hardly anybody uses film anymore. Nokia, dominant in the handset, and then suddenly overtaken and become irrelevant largely in the handset. So technology and technological change is a big factor in destabilizing many businesses. If I look at my business, when I joined the firm 27 years ago, nobody used a computer in the entire organization to do audits. Everything was done on paper. Nowadays, everything is done by computer. We outsource bits of the audit, so it's done in different places. We send files that are processed in Kazan. We have a shared service center in Kazan, and we do bits of the work on audits that we're doing in Novosibirsk, or we're doing in Almaty, or wherever we're doing them, and we do them in Kazan, because we can share the information, we can digitize it. You saw the digitization, the little noughts and ones. We can digitize the information and move the work around. So it has the possibility to solve problems, but it's also got the possibility to be disruptive. How will audits be done in the future? Will it all be done by computer? Will it be deep diving on clients' data through the cloud? What are the regulatory requirements around that? What are the regulatory issues? So it's a very challenging issue for us in terms of that could change the nature of the people we need to employ. Do we need more computer scientists, therefore? I'm a geographer. Do geographers still have a role in audit firms in the future? I don't know. It depends on what you think the skill set is to complete an audit, and that may change depending on the technology. The final one, demographic and social change. Between now and 2025, we will add, it's estimated, 1 billion people to the world. Half of those people will be in Africa. So this means that the population, the centers of population, where markets are, where productivity is changing. Different parts of the world have different demographic issues. Russia has a very specific issue that throws up all sorts of HR challenges for my business. Russia has a missing generation. In the 90s, there's a missing generation where the birth rate was extremely low, and consequently, we now have people leaving the labor force and not being replaced. The number of people coming into the labor force is falling, and the number of people leaving the labor force is increasing. So that creates a problem for our clients. It creates a big problem for me when there are 30% fewer young people available to hire, because we all want to hire young people, and we're competing for a decreasing number of people in Russia. In other parts of the world, that's not the issue. In Nigeria and places, you can have as many young people as you want. The issue is about how are we going to gainfully employ all of these people. In 2050, the average age in Nigeria is set to be 21. 21. in 2050, as against Japan, 53. So depending on where you're working and depending on where you want, what you're producing, that gives you some very interesting issues in terms of dealing with HR, because you have a completely different environment. So I hope in that introduction, I've explained what the 5 megatrends are, and I've also started to highlight a few HR challenges that might be embedded in some of those changes. How are we going to respond to the mega changes? How is it going to impact us as societies, as businesses, as individuals? So let me share with you a little bit more what I see as 3 key HR challenges. And this is based on research that is specific to Russia CIS that PwC has done. What we see as the 3 key HR challenges. And they reflect some of the things that we've just been talking about in terms of the hugely dynamic environment that we're working in globally, and it is a global world in terms of economics. We are in a global market. The first thing is, wherever you have change, you need leadership. Leadership's important at any point in business, but wherever you have change, leadership capabilities is what distinguishes between winners and losers. It's what distinguishes between great companies and adequate companies. It's what distinguishes between successful economies and economies that trail behind their peers. So leadership development, 55% of companies operating in the CIS see this as a major challenge, leadership capability, building leadership capabilities. So that's an area that we need to focus on. Employee engagement. I love the Generation Y. It's about hearts, winning their hearts. It's about engaging with your people in an environment where there is much higher mobility, where change breeds mobility, where we see people changing jobs and careers on a regular basis. You have to think about how you hang on to your people. For me, that's a huge issue. We lose about 20% of our people every year. Some of those people, it's a natural process, but many of them are people who are really important for our business, and we're really unhappy when they leave. People who we've invested in the skills of, people who we've turned into great leaders, and then they go off and they take that value, which is in them. Again, we don't have, it's not the technology, it's not the building, it's not the factory, it's the people that are the assets. And when your assets are people, you need to worry about employee engagement. And increasingly, where the real value is in society and in economies is people. That's where the value is. If you think about technology, technology is the headline, but behind that headline is the people that create that technology, the people that create that innovation, that come up with the new apps, come up with the next generation of phones, come up with the new ideas about how we're going to interact as a society. So we need to be focused on employee engagement, how you win their hearts and keep them in the team and help them. If they need to change, let's change the organization. Use that talent to change the organization. Productivity. Productivity, if I think about the number one challenge that we face in Russia at the moment as an economy, it's actually around stagnant productivity. We must improve the productivity of Russian business if we are going to be able to compete. The other markets, the other global players are changing, and if we don't address this productivity gap, we are going to fall further and further behind. So for HR professionals, the challenge is, how do you help your organizations improve the productivity of your people? It's not about retaining them's great, but how do you get the most out of them? How do you get them to be even more innovative than they've been in the past? How do you get them to do even more things than they've done in the past? Generate new ideas, win new clients, deliver even more work with the same amount of resources. How do you do that? And that's about productivity. Technology may be part of the solution. Changing your team structures may be part of the solution. That you can think about what are the solutions to that challenge. But for sure, productivity is at the heart of your competitiveness. And again, I go back to when I started and I think about how many hours it took to do an audit. I think the number of hours it takes today is probably about 10% of what it took 27 years ago. Because of the impact of technology, all our working papers are now electronic. Most of the processing is done electronically. We still need bright people who use analytical skills to look at the information, but most of the information has been digitized. So the amount of time involved in processing that information has gone down. Fortunately, our clients have got more complex. So the issues that we're dealing with have become more complex, again, because of technology, because of the ability of technology to increase the productivity of the clients and increase the amount of things that they do. So HR priorities against that background. What do we think are the HR priorities? Well, number one is managing change. And we have here the statistics around what was the old, in a previous survey, what was the old level of importance attached to this by HR professionals, and how many think that this is an area that needs improvement. Managing change is the key to success in business. It's a bit like with Darwin. It's not about who's the fastest, who's the strongest. It's about who's the most adaptable. Can you manage change successfully? Companies that don't manage change successfully, even though they were once dominant, disappear. Blockbuster video was everywhere. Like when I was 20 years ago in the UK, every street corner seemed to have a Blockbuster video. It was dominant. Gone completely, because again, it didn't adapt to the change, to everything going online, and it became an irrelevance. It could have been a player in that market, it could have been Amazon, but it wasn't. And so Amazon exists, Blockbuster doesn't. Organizational learning and knowledge transfer, a key issue to focus on. If you think about all of those changes and challenges, a lot of it is about, is your organization a place where people come and they don't just come, they have a skill and they employ that skill and at some point they leave? Is it an organization where you have learning opportunities, knowledge transfer? When I interview people about the firm, why are you joining PwC? They almost all use the word learn in their explanation. I'm coming to learn. And they made a wise choice because we invest an enormous amount of time and effort in learning and knowledge transfer. It's one of the cores of our business, is if I know something, it's worth one. If I know something and share it with the team, it's worth some multiple of that. So it's how do you do that? Is technology part of that? Is it mentoring, coaching? What are the techniques that you need to embed in your organization in order to thrive in this complex world? And you need to adapt to survive. For certain, you need to adapt. One estimate of the power of adaptability, that it could unlock an additional 130 billion in additional productivity in Russia. The skills gap, or another prediction around what's going to change, the skills gap will narrow with increased adaptability. So if we're more adaptable, then hard skills become less of an issue to overcome. If we're more adaptable, able to acquire these skills more easily, then we can compensate for missing skills rapidly. We can be more adaptable and more successful. Compromising on talent costs the global economy. It seems like an expense. When I look at my P&L, I'm the country managing partner, so I get the P&L, and it says revenues, and it says costs. Where does all this stuff that I'm talking about appear? It doesn't appear in the revenues line, it appears in the cost line. So it's tempting, particularly when times are tough, to say, well, do we really need to spend all that money on learning and development? Do we need to send people to business schools? Do we need to run training for people? Do we need to employ coaches to coach people? Isn't that something that we can cut back on? And the answer is always, we cannot afford to cut back on this area because compromising on talent costs. So it's very important to keep investing in your talent if you're going to be relevant. Visibility from online professional networks leads to better hiring. So this issue is technology. One of the solutions in technology is things like LinkedIn and other social networks for professionals. This is a tool that the individuals use, but we as an organization need to learn how to use it better to attract people, because that is going to be the market. In the old days, it was very difficult to get information about the availability of work and about the availability of people, and so there was a huge inefficiency in the market. I did a PhD on labor economics about how the docks worked in London in the 19th century, and they were about 30% efficient, i.e., on any one day, 70% of people were just standing around with nothing to do, because they didn't know how much work, they didn't know where people were available, and so you had lots and lots of people who would turn up at each separate geographical location. Sometimes they would be 100% employed at that location, but further down the road, there would be nobody employed. And they could have done, if we had this information shared, as this kind of technology will allow, then we will be able to be much more efficient. And why is this relevant? And why should we worry about this? Because the effectiveness with which we do these things will impact our competitiveness globally. This is a study we did of 11 major markets. Russia was not included in the study, so this was a global study about adaptability. How adaptable are the labor markets? How often do people change, in terms of how do we get to these statistics, and a high score is a good score, how often do people change job? How often do they switch industry? What are the vacancy rates? What are the promotion rates? These are indicators about a thriving HR environment, one that supports adaptability, allows people to go to where the needs are, acquire the skills they need, and to be more productive. And as you can see, the Netherlands came out on top. China, interesting, came out on bottom. China has achieved a lot of growth, but a little bit like in the Soviet Union, there was a kind of enormous productivity issue in China. A lot of people moved from the countryside to the cities, and there's been a big increase in productivity. But China needs to catch up in terms of these things, otherwise that will stop. China will hit a point where there will be diminishing returns on that change in productivity. So China needs to address some of these things. At the moment, people do not move frequently between organizations. They do not change careers. They do not learn new skills. And that will have a productivity impact on the country and its ability to sustain its economic growth. That's a lot of stuff. So what are my closing recommendations? For individuals, future-proof your career. So you should be thinking, unlike my father, who joined Barclays and stayed at Barclays for 43 years, unlike me, who joined PwC and stayed at PwC for 27 years and counting, you need to think about your career. How do you future-proof your career? What are the skills that actually make it possible for you to migrate from one job to another, that will ensure that you're in demand for the future? For employers, seek out, nurture, and reward adaptable talent. It's not about the person with one specific great skill. It's about those people who can move from job to job and adapt to the opportunities. For educators, offer courses and job training that produce adaptable people. You can see a word recurring in some of this. And for governments, create the climate for adaptability. And we are an adaptable race. The Homo sapiens is under 200,000 years old as a species. We started in Africa about 195,000 years ago. We are now all over the world. These are all people that work for PwC in different parts of the world. In every climate, humans thrive. Whether it's the Arctic or the Sahara, there are humans everywhere. So it's in our DNA to be adaptable. We are the adaptable ape. As a HR challenge, you have to tap into that adaptability, because that's going to be the key to success, whether you're looking at it from your individual perspective, whether you're looking at it from business perspective, whether we're looking at it from a society or a country perspective, or from your city. So I'll leave you with that question. What should we do in Russia to unlock our potential for growth? And I think it is about touching people's hearts. People want this. People want the challenge of adapting. So you've got to figure out how you offer that. If you're a business, you've got to figure out how you offer that chance to do what people like, which is, people say, oh no, people don't like change. Actually, the really great people, the people that will drive the future, are the people who not only like change, but thrive on change, who say yes when asked, do you mind switching from that department to this department? Do you mind changing your job from this place geographically to that place geographically? When I was offered, do you mind going to Russia for a week? I could have said, actually, I'm fine in London. I didn't. I said, yeah, let's do that. Do you mind switching from audit to running the learning and development program? Great. Do you mind switching to our risk management? Splendid. Do Do you mind running the assurance business? Absolutely. Do you mind being our country managing partner? Even better. So adaptability, I'm a living proof that adaptability is fun. I'm having a great time. Thank you for being patient with me. Спасибо большое.